Welcome to the Roses for and Everything. You're joined by Feenan and Nolsey on this Friday evening. How are you, Nolsey? You liking the cool weather?
Yeah, I'm really starting to enjoy not melting like a fucking vanilla ice cream when I'm going outside.
Yeah, I also just find the older I get, the less I like the heat for whatever reason.
Oh yeah,
I don't know what it is, but I definitely have that. It's nice to feel a cool
just getting
breeze.
old and cranky.
That might have something to do with it. I'm not sure. Well, guys, we thought today, again, mix it up a bit. Let's start with something a little irregular. And we thought we would talk about Australia's cooperation with ASEAN.
This Irish fellow, hey Sean, we're going to cooperate with a single Irishman.
Yeah, I do believe it is pronounced ASEAN. That's how I've heard it pronounced on the news anyway. And no, the A does not stand for Australia, like a lot of people think it does. It's actually Association of Southeast Asian Nations. And a few days ago, they had what I think was a 3-day summit in Melbourne. So we're not a member. However, we frequently cooperate and integrate ourselves within that.
We're stuck with these fucking jaundiced-looking monkeys.
Yeah, well, I mean, I believe it was Paul Keating who, really sort of pushed us. Yeah, well, I mean, because he basically, he loved using the term Australasia. Yeah. I mean, I don't think that term's used very much nowadays, but, he used it very intentionally to kind of say that Australia should not just be, geographically part of the Asia Pacific, but actually economically and even culturally. Keating had a bit of kind of political yellow fever, I think, and he had a man crush.
I can understand trading, like I can understand exporting and importing goods, services, and raw materials and whatnot. That just makes sense. That's just like, okay, everyone's going to benefit from that. I'm not entirely fucking concerned with the Asianization of Australia. Not that that's actually really a fucking the biggest concern anymore.
No, I'm kind of thinking now. I mean, look, I do have preferences when it comes to different races of people who live here, and I would rather Han Chinese than Indians, for example. I don't want either of them, but that's still my preference. So I know what you mean. But look, even the economic side of it though is getting gay now. Right? It's. Yes, I definitely agree. Trade with Asia, I've got absolutely nothing against it. I believe in basic protectionism and tariffs and the rest. But I don't support autarky. I've always found the idea of absolute self-sufficiency for a nation to be pretty silly and basically unworkable. But what they're getting
oddly enough, you attract too much attention. And, then you just basically give an incentive for people who could make money dealing with your country to agitate against your current government, which is not a good idea.
Yeah, but I mean, can you also just imagine the idea of Australia purely producing all of its software and hardware?
Oh, God.
What would that be like? Yeah. Because I do remember, you remember Jack Van Tongeren, the guy who blew up Asian restaurants?
Yeah.
He was fully supported. He wanted complete autarky for Australia, no foreign trade whatsoever. I was like, how could that work? How could that possibly work? But yeah, look, when I say that the economic side of it is getting gay as well, the main thing that they talked about in terms of Australian investment in ASEAN was climate change. So Albo announced a $2 billion investment into clean energy transitions in Southeast Asia. So I know part of that was with Singapore. They're getting in on all this action too, mainly just because they're just like a super city of business, and businesses would be crazy not to get in on all of the climate change action, which will yield you some nice profits.
Free taxpayer money.
Yeah. So I mean, look, there was other stuff that was talked about. For example, using Jakarta and Ho Chi Minh City as what they call landing pads to help drive the digital economy. So they love talking about innovation and ingenuity, all of those I words, a lot of the time as well. And look, as far as I know, there was really not any discussion about immigration. There was discussion about pushing China to the sideline. Basically, we believe that we are getting manhandled by Joe Biden into always wanting to push these Southeast Asian countries away from China and push them towards the West and America. And, Malaysia, which has, I think, been a fairly, they're an aggressively independent country, which you have to admire.
Yeah.
They're pushing right back against that and saying, no, we consider China to be an economic and a diplomatic partner. So, we're not going to settle for that. And by the way, Malaysia's prime minister right now is Anwar Ibrahim, who used to be the main sort of opposition leader back then, where, they would accuse Mahathir Mohamad of autocratic practices. Mahathir Mohamad was also the guy who said that the Jews rule the world. He said that at some summit. I can't remember where it was exactly. But he said that the Jews rule the world by proxy, and they get other people to die and fight in their wars for them. It was hard to dispute that. But Anwar Ibrahim was put in jail by Mahathir Mohamad. And do you know what what crime he was said to have committed?
Oh, God, it's going to be laughable, isn't it?
Sodomy.
Oh.
I don't know if that's laughable or not. But yeah, that's
kind of fucking funny.
Anwar Ibrahim has always denied it, though, and said it was purely political persecution and they just made it up.
Yeah.
I don't know what to think.
That does happen. Basically, one of the tools for say political persecution, when they say this is when the laws say oh yeah, we need to decriminalize homosexuality, blah blah blah. The first argument is never actually for gay rights. It's because look, every single example of us actually positively using this law, it's just basically been a political tool. So we need to get rid of it because it's it's stifling our political system. They even wheeled that argument out after Turing's suicide, because basically he got on the shit list because he was shit-talking intelligence powers post-World War II. And then suddenly he gets accused of being a homosexual and basically chemically lobotomized.
Yeah, I guess it was. Yeah, I mean, we should remember it was only a few decades ago that homosexuality was illegal in basically every country in the world, and yeah, look, whatever your position on that is, I do think that it's sort of a waste of the police's time to be out there actively monitoring that when they could be doing other things. So yeah, you can understand how it would just be sort of reserved as a political tool when it's needed.
Yeah.
It's a bit like when they get gangsters for tax evasion. It's like they know they're doing all this other shit, but they can't get them for it. So, all right, let's get them for tax evasion instead.
But also on another note, worst decision of my entire life, do not compare the trends of gay porn and Allah during the Ramadan cycles of all Arabic countries on Google Trends.
Okay. I'll keep that in mind. Yeah, so look, besides some shitty stuff about investing in the digital economy and green energy, I don't think there was anything of note there. And, again, like many of these global summits, the centerpiece of it was climate change. However, I don't think that any of these Asian countries really give a shit about it at all.
No.
Like, you can't convince me that, like, the political elite in Singapore are actually genuinely interested in it. It's just they know there's money to be made off of it. You know?
Yeah, like for example, like if you're one of these poorer jungle Asian countries, you know that those are the magic words that just allow more Western shekels to show up in your accounts. That's it. It's like like, do you think China gives a fucking shit when they build, like, what was it, like they built like fucking in a month they built like 5 coal-fired power plants that were like a little bit bigger than the scale that they'd seen in the US. Do you think, like, say, the Philippines really gives a shit when they barely have enough infrastructure to actually run a traditional power grid, let alone like an adaptive green power grid?
No.
Do you think the Malays really give a shit?
No. And I mean, they're close neighbors, like the Pacific Island nations. They don't care either. They say they care, and they say, oh, look, we're the worst ones affected because rising sea levels would mean we would be submerged in water. And it's like, okay, why is it also you're the only people who vote with the US against the UN resolutions condemning Israel, like in their illegal settlements, for example? It's because you're paid off. You don't really care about Israel.
The US is guaranteed 5 KFC family boxes per family every single day.
But seriously, if you look at it, like on the votes that are taken in the UN, like, when the UN passes a resolution condemning like a new settlement or something, the people who voted against it were Israel, America, and then it's like the Marshall Islands, Tuvalu, Vanuatu, Fiji. You just see these like pissant nations that no one cares about, and they're just getting bribed just because they want to put
literal sandbars.
Yeah. So look, one thing that did come out of it was a so-called Melbourne Declaration. So here's what it calls for. It calls for peace, security, and stability in the region. However, part of some of the language used was taken out, and that language regarded China. So it did call for China to behave themselves in the Asia Pacific and stop threatening its neighbors, such as Taiwan and Hong Kong, even though they are basically part of China. So that was taken out, and pretty much all of the ASEAN nations did not want that in there because they're all partners, even Malaysia. And, it's funny, like, Malaysia considers China such a close partner because the Malays, they fucking hate the Han Chinese.
Oh, God.
They hate them.
I think it might be a compromise, and also you have to understand that, like, since those like forced racial quotas were put in, like, they've been laxed a whole bunch, and then there's always been ways of going around them. Like, let's say the functional companies in South Africa, where you also have racial quotas, where you just have a shell company where like a black African is in charge, and actually really the person running the operation is a white dude. So the same stuff has happened in Malaysia as well. And,
yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. But still, I mean, I've actually worked with quite a few. One of my bosses actually was a Chinese Malaysian, and they've all got stories, man, about, like, getting screwed over trying to run a business over there. She basically told me that her family moved to Australia because their businesses could not, like, do well in Malaysia, because they were, getting taxed too much, and they were getting forced to hire Malays, the brown Asians.
Yep.
And she was like, yeah, in Australia, we don't have to put up with any of that shit. So you
for
can,
now.
you can, like, yeah, well, for now. And so, like, other countries' internal politics often actually does affect us, because it pushes, creates a push effect where they have ethnic groups who are incentivized to leave. And that's a good example of that. The best example is Palestinians, though, getting pushed out by Israel. Yeah.
Well, that's another little talking point. You hear the State of the Union address and what geriatric Joe Biden said he was actually going to implement in the Gaza Strip.
What did he say? Oh, he just did his State of the Union, didn't he?
Yeah, you did. No, so one of the probably there's so much drivel. I was talking with some Americans through it, and it's either just like fucking half truth lie or just like generic information that no one actually really gives a shit about unless you're really, really unhealthily plugged into politics. But the main shot is, and probably the main takeaway we took from it was that they're looking to set up a kind of a port, like a U.S. military protected port in Gaza. So why would they do that? And he was actually kind of like fast and loose about the reasoning behind it. And he said like, oh, it's for humanitarian reasons and aid and etc. It's like, oh no, that's an exfil port.
Okay.
That's getting these people out. That's that's completing what basically what every Israeli spokesperson, statesman, etc. has been saying for the past couple of months, which is, hey Europe, hey United States, hey Australia, hey developed Western world, we're done. Like we'll finish up blowing these people up in a hot minute. Now you're just going to take them.
Yeah, which was kind of the plan from the beginning, I think.
Yeah.
Now, by the way, the Melbourne Declaration, as it's been called, has also called for a ceasefire in Gaza. However, it did omit language that was critical of Israel. So it's basically like, let's go for a ceasefire now. We all want peace, but let's not point the finger at who's causing all the trouble over there.
Yeah.
So now I really, really suspect that omission of language was much more to do with Australia than it was any of these Southeast Asian nations.
Of course.
You know what? I think I've just found the audio of Mahathir Mohamad talking about Jews.
All right, you want to play it?
Oh, okay. No, it's a 4-minute video. I have to sift through it. I should have had that on hand. But if you guys can find it, I'm pretty sure it's still on YouTube. Just search Mahathir Mohamad Jews and you'll find it. It's a great classic clip. Okay. Well, let's talk about one of the other big stories of the week, which was the Dunkley by-election. So this was the seat in Victoria that is what they refer to as a marginally safe Labor seat, meaning they win it most of the time. It was left vacant by Peter Murphy, Peter with an A, who died of breast cancer at the age of 50. And by the way, another Labor senator has died. I'm sorry, I forget her name. She was a backbencher who wasn't that well known. That's coming up in the prep later, so I'll get to that then. So anyway, Labor won. Not a big surprise. As I said, it is a marginally safe Labor seat. They also held it by a margin of 6% in the last election. And generally speaking, seats like this will have a swing against whatever party is in power. All right, so Labor's in power. They go and they have this by-election, and yes, of course, inevitably there's a swing against them. And the swing was 3.6%, which is reasonable. All right.
Yeah.
Because
that's what you expect to see.
Yeah, well, look, I think it might have been a little more than you'd expect. A little bit more, because remember, Albo's only been in power for 2 years, or thereabouts, So it shouldn't have been that much of a swing. I think he's already angered a lot of people with the state of the economy. And worse still, like the idea he put in everyone's head that he was never even concerned about the economy. He was just concerned about the voice referendum and getting that through, and that was a failure. So I think that would have had an impact here. But what was also interesting about this is that Labor's primary vote held very, very solid at pretty much 50%. And then after preferences, that's when you had the swing. So their primary vote was actually pretty good. However, the Greens did very badly in this election. Now, over at Sky News, they're saying that must be because of the emerging anti-Semitism within the Greens. At least that's what old Shari said the other day. You've seen her on Sky News.
What?
Well, you know that they actually ran a Jewish candidate there, right? So I honestly don't think that anyone besides, mindless almost said Fox News there, Sky News viewers. I was just going to say Sky News is basically the Australian Fox News.
Is there functionally a fucking difference?
Yeah, not really. No, just Australian accents. That's all. Sometimes even they've still got Americans on there. So no. And of course, the Jewish lobby as well, who keep kvetching. And
yeah.
We covered last week that they're demanding that Labor put the Greens last on all of their how to vote cards now. Whereas in the late 90s, they were the ones who originally said one nation must be put last on the how to vote.
Yeah, it's quite literally it was Jewish influence that turned like the Greens from like tree hugging, like just basically just basic bitch tree huggers into what they are today.
Yeah, I mean, look, it may still have spooked the Greens in some way, as I say, because they did run a Jewish candidate. So, that's possible. But it's also just completely possible that they thought he was the right candidate. There's always been Jews involved in it. The world over. I mean, the unofficial leader of the Green movement in America is Jill Stein. Okay? I shouldn't need to point out that her name echoes. So I don't buy this idea that it's to do with anti-Semitism. I do think that the party is facing a backlash, though. And that's because people are finally drawing the connection between green energy and higher power prices. People are actually making that connection. And as we covered last week or the week before, people are also, the younger you are, the more likely you are to link nuclear power with reducing carbon emissions. So it's good to know that there's a little bit of common sense, at least when it comes to energy and climate policy, that is emerging in the public, and you can see that translated into what they're doing at the polling booth. So if you ask me, that's actually what it was. The Greens lost 4 percentage points because of that. People are angry at them. And they also just kind of look at the state of the economy and say, all right, well, the Greens are even more economically irresponsible than Labor, so there's no way I would vote for them to get us out of the current economic mess that they're in, especially when all they want to do is just import more immigrants all the time, which is the number one cause of the soaring cost of living.
Yeah, again, that is, again, like normally it's like a relatively, like you have to find someone who's right-leaning and then someone who's specifically like a very niche kind of right-leaning, like only a few years ago. I'm hearing that talking point on the day-to-day, like literally like, holy fucking shit, why are we doing this? I don't care about your business argumentation that it's going to like create money, because I've heard about that. I've heard that before. And this is actually where the left-leaning part of the argument comes from. It's like, oh, big business creating, like earning lots of profit actually doesn't really actually come down to me. I don't see any benefit from that. That is now just in the fucking mainstream, it's interesting. It's hopeful. But let's see how they squash it, actually. Yeah.
Now, the Teal vote also went backwards as well. I'm not sure if they... I can't remember the Teal candidate's name. But yeah, this was like very much a contest purely between Liberal and Labor. So I guess with the state of the economy going this way, people are just kind of going back to the major parties, which is weird because in the last election, remember, both Labor and Liberals won roughly 1/3 of the vote each, and then the other third went to other parties, independents, Teals, Greens, whatever. Now that, of course, is assuming that we can look at Dunkley as a kind of microcosm. And look, we basically can't, because it's not a marginal seat. I think only a marginal seat would show you really what that is. When you have that split and when you've got a lot of swing voters going on who are the most kind of persuaded by current circumstances rather than the principles or general policies of a political party.
Yeah. Yeah, so, you're not going to get that level of volatility on the large scale.
Yes. So, we can't draw too much from this, is what I'd say.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Let's it's Jody Belia is the new candidate, so she will be sitting in the backbench for the House of Reps. Okay, so let's move on to Israel and Gaza. So Penny Wong, who, Sky News don't outright call her an anti-Semite, but they might as well with all the innuendo that they use about her, saying it's clear what side she's really on and all that. So she asked her department to tell the Israeli ambassador that Australia is horrified at the reports of Israeli troops opening fire on Palestinians as they were waiting for food aid. We know this truck that came in. And then, of course, later on, the Israelis said no, that they were killed in the stampede. Okay, if that's true, what caused the stampede? I know it's not, but even if it is true, what would have caused so many people to hysterically run over people? It wouldn't have anything to do with the IDF shooting into the crowd, would it?
That's a weird one, and again, it's the same tactic. I mean, someone showed me, last year, that one excerpt from a newspaper saying look, they'll blatantly lie, walk the truth back a little bit, and then say but the enemy's worse. Admit that they're actually worse than the enemy, but be well, we had to do it. And if you're still focused on it after that point in time, when it's becomes so old that it's irrelevant, then you're just an anti-Semite.
Right, and that's it. I mean, if you think that this the IDF should not have fired into this crowd that resulted in the deaths of over 100 people, and remember, these are 100 people who were lining up to get food, people who were starving, and they were met with death from Israeli gunfire. And it just shows it. Part of the tactic, Israel likes to brag about how they do things like provide their own aid to Palestine, or they give warnings of when they're going to bomb a certain area. Very often, the aid is simply used to bait them into a trap, and the same thing goes for warning them of a particular bombing. They tell them to evacuate to some area, and then they bomb that area, which is basically the plan in Rafah, which is in the south of the Strip. That's what they're doing. So, and these incidents seem to be so common now, and the excuses always being ridiculous every single time. This isn't a case of telling the same lie over and over again so people would believe it. It's a collection of lies that are different each time, and you begin to just notice that there's a pattern of deception to it. So what I'm saying is, I don't think people are buying this shit anymore, except if you're some moron who is glued to Sky News.
Yeah.
You really have to be that kind of type. And even young conservatives, I don't think are on board. It's almost exclusively a boomer conservative thing. Not just a conservative thing, but a particular age group. It's just boomers. All right. So, anyway, here's what the statement from Penny Wong said. Australia is horrified by today's catastrophe in Gaza and the ongoing humanitarian crisis that has led to it. These events underscore why for months Australia has been calling for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza. Civilians must be protected. Humanitarian aid must reach civilians in desperate need. That first part of the statement is not true. The bit where she said that Australia had been calling for months for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire, that's not true. when we were about 2 months into this, Penny Wong said that Israel needed to take the steps necessary to bring about a ceasefire.
And then she got a paddling for even that.
Yeah. So, yeah, she didn't even say we support a ceasefire. So for her to be saying, like, yeah, we've been calling for an immediate ceasefire for months, huh?
Yeah.
No, that's just not true. You kicked the can down the road, actually, at the beginning of this, using very kind of soft language and, trying to she's still trying to walk the tightrope at the moment. But I do think that the outrage against Israel is just so great. Like I was just saying before, like no one is buying this now, except for conservative boomers, that it is increasingly difficult to sell to the public the idea that Israel is just an innocent victim in all of this. And Penny Wong knows that. She knows that their Arab and Muslim constituents don't buy it for a second. So I think for once, this is sort of outweighing the pressures of the Australian Jewish lobby, which is good to see. Even if
it'll be nice to know their limits, and it'll be nice to know their limits not for this fucking conflict, but for any other fucking action against
them. I mean, it's kind of sad that it has to be brought about by one of the Jewish golems. Yeah. That is mass immigration that's resulted in a much larger Muslim population in Australia. But, you got to take the wins where you can and not complain too much about it. So there is a law firm in Western Sydney. It would have to be Western Sydney, wouldn't it? Called Birchgrove Legal. Now, this is run by Lebs. They're and I believe actually that, they're sort of seen as the law firm to go to when you're a Lebanese person who has been involved in criminal activity, particularly violent criminal activity, gang activity in Western Sydney. All right. But putting that aside, they have made an official, they've written an open letter to the International Criminal Court that accuses Anthony Albanese and Australian Labor Party MPs of supporting war crimes in Israel. Now, this goes back to the language, as I was just talking about before. Australia did not call for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. So by doing that, by not condemning Israel's actions, by not referring to it as, say, collective punishment or genocide, whatever you might want to say, that just says that from a diplomatic level, Australia had at least been complicit in the atrocities that Israel had been and continues to commit in Gaza. Here's what Albo said. I don't think that peaceful resolution is advanced by misinformation, and there has been substantial amounts of misinformation about what is occurring. We stand by our position. Australia joined a majority in the UN to call for an immediate ceasefire and to advocate for the release of hostages and delivery of humanitarian systems and the uploading of international law. Okay, I guess that's
definitely the latter part, but
the latter part is true. But
yeah,
again,
I don't think the fucking former was at all.
Yeah, this stuff about the immediate ceasefire, no, that's actually just blatantly not true. So, look, Birchgrove Legal, even if they're a dodgy law firm, they've got a point here. Look, I'm not saying that things would have gone the other way. Like if Australia had used, tougher language on Israel, that would mean Israel would have backed off a bit. Because even when America does that, Israel doesn't back off. They keep exerting their influence and through their lobbying power, of course. But the Jignats are running the show right now. If they weren't, then they wouldn't be opening fire on people waiting for food aid, for God's sake.
No, they wouldn't. But again, as I iterated before, don't worry, this is all going to come to a head, and then it's going to figure out which country they're going to divvy them up into. Which countries? Yeah.
Right. Well, we also know that Michael Danby attended a conference in Israel where they said that when it came to the African refugees who were coming into Israel, they're like, just send them to Australia.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So Michael Danby, an Australian, said, "Oh yeah, put him in my country, or put him in the economic zone that I live in." Might have been the way he worded it. Okay, so it's not just the Greens that is drawing the ire of the Australian Jewish lobby. It's also, to an extent, the Teals. Now, they already got Zoe Daniel, who was a former ABC journalist. They got her on board after she made some criticisms of Israel. Later on, she just she did a Marlon Brando and just reversed everything basically. So it'll be interesting to see this time what Allegra Spender will do. One of our other Teal MPs in the House of Reps. So she had her invitation to speak at a Jewish charity event cancelled. So this was actually the 25th anniversary of the non-profit B'nai B'rith, the Courage to Care Initiative is what this is called. This is the event.
The sense to subvert. Jesus Christ, it's B'nai B'rith.
Yes. What'd you say? Was something in subvert?
The sense to subvert.
Sense to subvert. So yeah, I don't know what exactly she was planning to do here. When it comes to Courage to Care, look, whatever window dressing they put on this, I'm sure it's just simply money to advance Jewish interests of whatever.
It's B'nai B'rith. Jesus fucking Christ. That's all they do.
Yeah. Of course. So anyway, she released a statement saying that it was a mutual agreement between herself and B'nai B'rith that she would withdraw from it. And this is to do with the fact that she signed a joint letter with other Teal candidates as well to call on Penny Wong to explore other means of directing aid to Gaza be found, or else funding to UNRWA, UN Relief and Work Agency, be restored. Because, yeah, remember that the main institution providing humanitarian aid to people in Gaza was UNRWA. And right now, Australia donates zero money to that institution. The same with many other Western countries who suspended their aid because apparently people who work for them also work for Hamas. Right. But I mean, the practical outcome of that, of course, is just further infliction of pain and suffering on the civilian population. The idea that that money was being used, to go into funding militant activities is a joke. And even if it did, what does Hamas really have except glorified fireworks? Their missiles aren't worth a pinch of shit. And the Iron Dome is only effective in taking some of them out. The main reason why they don't cause any damage is not because the Iron Dome is spotting them and
missiles are so fucking low yield.
And a lot of the time they just land in open space, So even if it could have caused a bit of damage, it just doesn't. It just hits dirt somewhere. Okay. So we have the annual iftar dinner. Now, this is kind of like Victoria's political elite and Muslim elite who come together for a big, expensive dinner once a year. And it has actually been cancelled for 2024. So it's for a few reasons, but the main reason basically is that Muslims see this as sort of too much of a celebration right now when, we should be mourning what's going on in Gaza. So it's not just that; it's also the fact that the Labor government now, that is under Jacinta Allen, well, same thing that Birchgrove Legal is saying about Albo. They're saying that they're not harsh enough with their language and condemning what is actually going on over there at the moment. So, what's interesting, though, also about this, is that one of the funders of the iftar dinner is from the Islamic Council of Victoria, and he referred to the October 7 attacks as a resistance. He said, yeah, so he said this: what we don't denounce very clearly is legitimate acts of resistance, and for the Palestinians to rise up on October 7 and say we are no longer going to tolerate this siege, this occupation, that is legitimate. So there we go. He basically said that the
state of Israel is illegitimate.
Yeah, and also that October 7 uprising was completely legitimate itself. So over at the UCAJ, Alex Rivkin, you said that this guy. Oh, sorry, I forgot to give the guy's name, didn't I? Why don't I have this in my... I'm sorry, Salman something. Anyway, he said, condemned Salman's attack to defend as resistance the mass slaughter, abduction, rape of young girls at gunpoint as their families were forced to watch the carnage at a dance festival. They always mention the dance festival, don't they?
Oh, yeah.
So the Islamic Council of Victoria, as you can imagine, like pretty much any other religious institution in Victoria, receives state funding. So the UCAJ, and I'm sure every other Jewish lobby, is calling for them to be immediately defunded, much the same way that they want UNRWA defunded as well. They do this every time. And you see, that really shows like the Jewish attitude towards money. The president's name was Adel Salman. That's the guy from the Islamic Council of Victoria. You know, when they say like give us money and take it away from them, you know, it's not because they want to buy more jewelry or something. It's because they know money is power, and the more government grants they get, you know, the more they can put into so-called security, which they really just put into their own communities and furthering their interests and political lobbying. That's really all it is. So if you can take that same funding away from rival groups like the Islamic Council, well, obviously that means they can't exert as much influence as what they could. So, you know, that's it. That's what at the end of the day, money is power. And unfortunately, there is a lot of truth to that.
Yeah.
Okay. So just a couple of quick stories to finish off the Israel-Gaza section. The live sheep and cattle that was, it still is actually kind of in a state of limbo, that went from Australia bound for Israel. It could not pass through the Red Sea because of, you know, what the Houthis are doing over there. It originally turned back to Australia, and now it's going to turn back again, and this time not pass through the Red Sea, which I imagine, because I remember reading with other shipments that had to do this, that meant they had to go around South Africa. Like, you basically have to go behind Africa, which literally costs like...
We run it on that 17th century shipping route.
Yeah. Which has, you know, understandably has pushed up transport and fuel costs by millions of dollars for all of these companies. But in this case, you know, because these animals have been out at sea for so long, they are probably
diseased and or dying.
Yeah, they are standing like knee high in their own shit and piss. That's what happens when you leave them there. And originally, like, this was certainly what I thought was going to happen, and I thought they were just going to slaughter them on board and then get rid of them. But no, they're still alive, and apparently they're still bound for Israel. So they're going to they're going to
Goes
use
a
these
long
like
way.
disease-ridden animals as food.
Yeah, I think that something fucking nasty is going to happen at one point or another. And I don't think I don't think diseased mutton is going to taste fucking Jewish lips.
Well, that's what they're saying anyway. Okay, and lastly, there's a comedy pair from Israel, and apparently their theatre show has been canned. I'm reading this story from The Australian, as you can imagine. So Shahar Hassan and Yoav Sponder, so they are apparently two of Israel's biggest comedy stars. They're saying that they are being held to a different standard because of their race and religion. After the Chauvel Cinema, which is operated by Palace Cinemas in East Sydney, and they said, this is our first time in Australia and we didn't expect to face these sorts of difficulties. Now, yeah, it is true that they were disinvited here. It's actually more because of the fact that they have been vocally pro-Israel. All right. I mean, as is their right to do, that's fine. You can do that or whatever. But the idea that they actively discriminated against them on the basis of race and religion is not true. This was political. It was purely political. Because, look, if the current conflict was not going on right now and they weren't promoting that cause, I can't see how they would not have just let them in anyway, you know?
Yeah.
Unless, look, I had never heard of this pair until I read this story. But unless they had been really militant about settlements in the Gaza Strip or something like that, and this place is run by a bunch of Arab Muslims, then maybe I could see it happening. But we are actually currently in an environment where, like, you had a lesbian couple who didn't want to have a gay Jewish surrogate be a sperm donor, if you remember that story.
Yeah, that was fucking hilarious.
Covered a few weeks ago. And it's purely because of the current conflict, because everyone is looking on in horror at it. Okay. So let's move to immigration now.
Hello.
And this was like the one story the Greenies really loved. All the refugee advocates loved this story. So there was a 44-year-old former immigration detainee who is part of the the 149, who was in indefinite detention, and of course he was let out because of the High Court ruling. Now he was charged with sex offences in Melbourne. A few hours after he had appeared in court, the police withdrew the charges, and they said that he had been wrongly identified as the culprit.
Of course, that absolves the rest of the entire fucking party, doesn't it?
Right. So, I mean, look, naturally, when news of this first broke and the guy was still had the charges pending, the coalition, Peter Dutton, got in on this and used it as an opportunity to attack Labor further on being soft on immigration. It was only a few hours later then they had to retract all of that. So yeah, the Greenies are loving this. They're like, oh, look, see the knee-jerk reaction jumping at something like this. Okay.
Oh God, you goddamn reactionaries. Oh, you reactionaries.
Yeah, well, if you look at it, there's 149 of these people who were in indefinite detention and then they were let out. There's actually been around 30 now who, since being let out into the public, reoffended. And think about it, they have not been out for very long. What's it been, a couple of months or something? So
probably for the first guy, not for the fucking rest of them.
When you've got, people who have been in jail for murder, for rape, for aggravated burglary and the like, it's not a surprise that it's just sort of hardwired into them to go out and commit these kind of crimes all over again, especially when they're fortunate enough to have just been given a free pass, to be literally given a get out of jail free card. So,
but it wasn't jail; it was inhumane super Nazi detention camps.
And by the way, this guy, anyway, part of the reason that he may have been incorrectly identified is simply because of the fact that he did have a criminal record for sex offences. You know, that's part of the reason why the cops went in and got him. He fit a profile. So, you know, you'll hear very little about that.
Again, I wonder how much of that identification actually was physical identification. Did he actually look like the perpetrator as well?
Look, he might have. Now, I didn't see anything on...
I'm just going to conjecture. I mean, that's just me making a conjecture.
Yeah, likely not. Yeah, I won't say for certain because I don't know that info in front of me. I don't know actually what ethnic group he was a part of. But anyway, just to counter that with another recent example here, this was a Sudanese-born man, and he is charged with failing to comply with his visa mandated conditions and with breaching bail. Right. No, here's the number. I'm sorry. At least 26 of the cohort have reoffended since they were let out. Okay.
Yeah, so we're 1 out of 26. We were banned on 1 out of 26.
Yeah. So that's the thing. So I mean, that's immediately neutralized by this guy right here.
Oh, God.
Yeah. And Jesus, Sudanese make me really trigger me. Like this, when I see them, they're like one of the most triggering sights there is, you know.
They're very alien looking. Again, it's like when you see like a full-blooded Aboriginal and the physiognomy, like the proportions don't look right.
Yeah, that's true. But like when I look into the eyes of a Sudanese person, I see like pure rage. I see a face like I'm going to eat your babies, you know. And they usually have bloodshot eyes as well. That doesn't help.
Yes, and the slight jaundice, the slight like that little film over their eyes as well.
Yeah, and that's what particularly makes me sick about them. Anyway, this guy, he was a 37-year-old, this Sudanese guy, and he's actually now facing 5 years in prison and up to a $93,000 900 fine. So, yeah. So I don't know exactly how he broke his bail conditions, but it sounds like it was pretty serious. Okay. So, let's move on to climate and energy. I believe we got a few stories for you this week on that. So, one of the ways Darwin is now considering making the switch to green energy is by buying up solar farms that were constructed by the private sector and have been sitting idle. Now, what you have to ask here is, why is it that these solar farms, you know, which is just like a big field full of solar panels, why is it that they are sitting idle? Why are they sitting there, like, not generating any electricity whatsoever? It couldn't have anything to do with the fact that they're simply not getting enough solar power, could it? Like, the sun is not shining. And
I made sure to plug my ears and just go la 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 as I watched Michael Moore's Planet of the Humans.
Yeah. And obviously, if you have made some kind of a power plant that is sitting there idle,
what the fuck is going on?
Fair to say that you've made a bad business decision. Either that, or you are heavily incentivized by the government to build it. Because why the hell else would you build something that is just going to sit there and do absolutely nothing? So I would want to know, how would it be that the Darwin Labor government could somehow come in, buy up these idle farms, and then get them into a state of activity? In other words, how could they actually get the sun to shine more? Can someone explain that to me?
Well, yeah, and also I was actually just listening to an ABC show where they went over kind of like the mincing words. Guy was trying to say everything that was, you know, positive, or try and make it out like everything was going positive. But if you actually listen to what he was saying, it was just like, look, the only reason why there was like a residential solar industry in the first place on the macro scale was, one, people who were using power during the day could actually make use of it. Or you had the like super rich who were just like, oh yeah, fuck it, I'm going to do this for the sake of virtue signaling, because you basically have to become an energy day trader to make batteries work. And or three, that basically like, oh, during the start they were paying people like 60 cents a kilowatt hour. And when I say 60 cents a kilowatt hour, I'm talking about both Western Australia, South Australia, and New South Wales were paying that rate to start off with, basically nearly a decade ago, which is now just, it's gone. You're lucky to get 6.
Yeah, and by the way, it's not just the Northern Territory that has these idle farms. Like, we love talking about the one that was constructed in Queensland. Well, actually, no, this one's not idle. They tore it apart. They deconstructed it. That was the one that cost, I think it was around $300 million. This was like a joint government business venture, and it ended up just generating so little power that they thought it was more viable to just go in and destroy it. They literally came in and deconstructed it. Other ones, like we have here, just sit there doing nothing. So, yeah, that's part of it, of the green energy transition. Buying up idle solar farms, sitting there doing fuck all.
And then maybe just destroying them.
All right, so now here, I guess, somewhat of a white pill, or at least, let's say, some smarter policy coming from the coalition, and that is that the coalition have all but confirmed that they're going to be officially supporting nuclear power in Australia. Now, we covered either last week or the week before how, you had that poll. Wait, I already mentioned it, didn't I? About young people wanting, preferring nuclear power as a way of combating climate change. So, Dutton would be aware of data like that. I think he knows that there's a general change of mood among Australians in their attitude towards nuclear power. In other words, they're not as scared of it anymore. Most people who remember the horrors of Chernobyl, they're either dead or there's not just that many of them anymore. Most people today, did not grow up being scared by it. So we do have a different view of it. Although some people still do think it works like in The Simpsons, where you have like 3-eyed fish swimming outside the reactor or something like that. But yeah, anyway, basically it's an open secret now that not only are they going to support nuclear power, but they are going to link that intrinsically with their own net zero by 2050 target. Because remember, unfortunately, that is bipartisan, the net zero by 2050. Even on paper, Barnaby Joyce is behind it, even though he's not in real life. So that part of it, I guess, sucks. But this is perhaps a return to the one delineation between Labor and the coalition that, you could say was genuinely there. And that was a difference in energy policy. I often said that like the one thing that I liked the coalition better on, and that they were somewhat consistent on, was energy policy. The reason I say that is, say, Tony Abbott doing the scrap the tax thing. Or remember the National Energy Guarantee, the NEG?
Oh, fuck.
That was basically the downfall of Malcolm Turnbull as well. That included, more emissions cuts. And a lot of people forget this. It was the first downfall of Malcolm Turnbull as well. Remember when he was opposition leader? He wanted to support the ETS. He wanted bipartisan support with Kevin Rudd implementing an ETS. That is what led to Tony Abbott challenging him for the leadership, and he lost. So that was actually, energy was a genuine issue where you had true believers who were willing to put their political clout on the line. I then went and said that I thought that distinction, that delineation between Labor and Liberal, moved away once the coalition supported net zero by 2050.
Oh, yeah.
Because, yeah, I mean, before they would always say, no, this is too much, it's too far, it's too bad for the economy. We don't support measures like that. But they got it on board, even though, as I say, people like Barnaby Joyce behind the scenes were very, very miffed about it. Now, could we be seeing a pivot in the other direction now? Are we going to see this clear demarcation between Labor and the coalition when it comes to how to actually keep the lights on? And it looks like we might. Assuming that this open secret is true, that it's going to head in that direction.
I'll play cynical party here and just say, like, well, the main question people should be asking about that is, have people made enough money? And there's very, very few instances where they'll accept something, accept a pull out on some kind of investment or some kind of investment plan before negative, like true economic, like not just like negative in terms of material, because we're already well past that, but true negative financial impacts come. In those just general regards, like, we are coming up to the end of it. I can definitely see the end of it on the horizon. I just don't think we're there yet.
Yeah,
and it's not like the negative impacts in the general population are actually going to influence this decision. Like, I've made that statement before.
No, look, the Greenies are going to go mental over this, or they already kind of have so far. The only thing I think that could, generally threaten this is, the kind of environmental activism that, looks more like terrorism, gluing your hands to the roads and putting a bike lock over your head and attaching it to your steering wheel during peak hour traffic on a freeway. That kind of shit. I fucking bet you that lefties are going to do that. Like, if, say, in a few years' time, they start converting a coal-fire plant, which is, by the way, basically what the Liberal Party want to do. The coal-fire plants that are closing, they want to convert those into nuclear reactors. That's anyway what Ted O'Brien, he's the opposition energy spokesman, so Chris Bowen's opponent in Parliament, he said that's basically what they should do. Like, there's no point in just letting them sit there. Let's actually turn them into something. And in the event that they do that, when construction is going on, oh man, like, I hate to think of what the protests are going to be like by the Greenies.
Yeah, I'm thinking about this. Remember, the only reason why those people are protesting isn't because of some genuine conviction. It's because they've been given like the little status symbol saying like, oh yeah, if you support this, you are a high status person. That programming can be turned on and off very quickly.
That's true.
There was tacit guarantees by the state that they wouldn't actually be punished for their actions, and they were not.
Well, the woman who locked her head to the steering wheel, she actually got off because of past trauma. And the past trauma was the flooding in Lismore. So she actually blamed like an event that she said was caused by climate change for trauma that induced her to lock her head to her steering wheel. I'm not making this up. She got off in court with that excuse. She got off completely scot-free. And I mean, blocking traffic is an extremely serious thing. There is more than likely emergency vehicles. There are fire engines. There are ambulances that take these roads, and they may have been delayed or even stopped from going to their destination. It's an extremely serious offence. And that
was one of the things. I saw a video of one of those Just Stop Oil Now in the UK protesters getting arrested. And I found it really, really interesting because the police originally came up and were like, oh, we're, arresting, because this woman was, caught dead to rights in the thing, like full face and everything, completely identifiable, like 100% identifiable. Saying like, oh, the police originally came and said, oh, we're like doing the thing. Oh, we're arresting you in relation to this. And then there was a bystander filming on, and then basically the police come up and whisper something to her. And then she says, oh, I wasn't even in London at the time. It's like, oh, well, then we're arresting you on conspiracy to commit. Obviously, like in the UK, conspiracy, it's a lot easier to just, be like, oh, I didn't actually mean this, this, and this. Well, unless you're the wrong party, by the way. But yeah, basically someone caught on camera this little fucking, daughter. I think someone identified as like the daughter of some like fucking like investment banker, and then some big like her daddy went to that school that all the parliamentarians come from, and blah blah blah. So yeah, like this useless daughter of a rich kid, basically getting coached on how to walk down her own charges by the police officer sent to arrest her.
Yeah, they don't offer those same classes to white nationalists, do they? Because they wouldn't work.
I don't think they do.
Somehow we can't pull that shit, They look for
Somehow,
any excuse possible.
doing quantifiable material damage to a piece of artwork in a protected private residence in the UK gets you a mock arrest, but putting up stickers gets you 2 years. Free my boy Sam.
Oh, that British guy. What's his name? You're talking
Sam
about the British.
Laura Taylor's husband, Sam.
Yes, it was Sam something, wasn't it?
PA guy, Sam Mellor.
Yeah, who was just put stickers up. Man, they are fucking extinct. I see Extinction Rebellion stickers like everywhere. I work in the CBD, and I see them fucking everywhere, man. And whoever like gets arrested for doing that, I mean, that's still technically illegal, like putting up a sticker. I believe it's a form of vandalism or littering. But again, it's just one of those things. The cops will never ever enforce it unless you're part of a politically persecuted group.
Yeah, that's it. And again, that was making the rounds even in conservative circles just because of how heinous it was. And I want to make sure that everyone actually understands this. Like literally, it was just so obviously two-tiered, because the same judge, and when I say the same judge, I mean the same judge, gave a migrant community service work for brutally raping a 14-year-old.
Oh man, Jesus. I hate hearing this stuff,
Yeah, no one likes to hear it. That's just reality.
Actually, no, I take that back. I'm not pessimistic. I'm just realistic. I'm just looking at the facts as they are. And, unfortunately, I don't see the future as very rosy.
One of the best parts about being this little fucking niche circle that we're in is we actually have a a decently objective worldview. We're able to predict things at a reasonable rate with a reasonable amount of accuracy.
Yeah, but I don't know if that confirmation bias is compensation enough for seeing how bleak the future is. It's like, okay, my biases are being confirmed with facts that I don't want to be true.
Yes, it's like
I want to be wrong. I really, really want to be wrong. I do.
I still remember that one. This was like back in the day when people were using like alt-right as a term, and it's just like a stick figure with alt-right in the head. It's like, this is what's going to happen, and then he's like, and how does this advance your cause? It's like, it doesn't. I don't want this to happen. I just know it's going to happen.
Yeah. I kind of miss the days where we use the term alt-right. Like, because I still actually kind of like it. I think it's still.
Too much poison on that well, buddy.
Yeah, I know. Okay, so another story on climate is, another one of the, you could say, unintended consequences of moving into a green energy economy is that we do have, apparently anyway, a skills shortage when it comes to maintaining certain technology that we use. So I'm not just talking about, say, the upkeep that's involved on a solar farm or a wind farm or something like that. I'm also talking about mechanics for electric vehicles. So new study has come out saying that half of all advertised jobs for that they refer to them as electric vehicle technicians. Basically means you're a mechanic for EVs. Yeah. Only half of them are being taken up. So not a surprise, because this is not a natural change that's occurring in the market. It's very much incentivized by government. It's been pushed all the time. And when you do something at that kind of speed, when you put those perverse incentives in, you don't allow enough time for other externalities to catch up. Okay.
Support industries, yes.
Yeah, and one of them is just getting people skilled up.
With how novel and how niche the difference between the internals and mechanics of a traditional combustion engine vehicle, or like ICE car and an EV car, the differences between them would require the re-education of basically any mechanic dealing with it. That's assuming you're starting with a mechanic, which, by the way, you're not, or you won't be.
Yeah, maybe I shouldn't use that term then. Just an electric vehicle technician, I guess, is what I should say.
Yeah, because it's fucking worlds apart. It's worlds apart. And just for an example, something that we've actually seen, because we're speculating on something that's going to happen. These support industries, if say EVs actually take up and aren't just a upper middle class toy, you're looking to the same kind of development that even say the company Tesla had, right? A company that eats, national security, defense, and government contracts in the United States of America, one of the the biggest country for expenditure in those fields. They ate those contracts up left, right, and center, and stumbled into that industry like a drunk.
Okay.
Like the amount of fuck ups that happen, from point A to point B, from the first model Tesla, which is basically obsolete and completely fucking useless, to like the production of, say, something like the Cybertruck, which has now found a niche because America's basically become a functioning rolling war zone. And luckily enough, like work hardened stainless steel panels can actually deflect some like smaller caliber bullets, or catch them at least.
Yeah, well, wasn't there like some where they had this grand opening where they announced like a new round of Tesla vehicles, and Elon Musk like personally was there, and then he's like, "Have a look, like it's got a bulletproof window," and then he smashes the window.
Yeah, that was the Cybertruck. They apparently they damaged the window. Apparently the windows are good now. I've got a guy. I know a guy who owns one in the States, and apparently the windows are good, and they can basically chew anything up to like 45 ACP, which is what your North American projects dweller. That's normally the type of armament they throw around. So they'll be fine. They'll do.
Right.
But yeah, like again, like it's an entirely new industry. How long did the fucking Cybertruck a company that can now very easily and quickly literal rocketry?
Oh, you're going robot, Nolsey.
Oh no.
You're okay now, but for a few seconds there.
All right, there we go. I blame it on the West Australian internet.
Yeah, but I mean, obviously, it takes time for these skills to kind of pass through, and
Yes.
people like. I mean, look, I didn't even think about this before. Like obviously, there is a need for electric vehicle technicians out there. You can't just bring your Tesla to the normal mechanic. So, and you do meet like plenty of young guys that say, "Yeah, I want to be a mechanic when I'm older." But I don't think you meet many that say, I want to be an electric vehicle technician. It's just not there. So there wouldn't even be that many people enrolling in the courses. Now, despite this, the government is still going to introduce legislation this year that is designed to encourage people to buy more electric vehicles. Now, it's not just through subsidizing electric vehicles. It's also to do with things like they're going to make more chargers available. But most important,
punishing ICE owners.
Yeah, but they're planning to basically fine car manufacturers for cars that emit too much. So they give them a fine for whatever the estimate is on the carbon footprint, and then naturally the car company passes those cost increases onto the consumer. In other words, you're going to get a more expensive car. It will make your Toyota Hilux, your Ford Ranger, your gas guzzler will be even more expensive. And that apparently is supposed to incentivize us to get more electric vehicles, which in the end means that you're going to have all of these electric vehicles who, I don't know, take a month to get booked in for a repair job because people just aren't there. The skills aren't there.
Well, again, one of the most attractive things about being a mechanic in the first place is the ability for you to go cross-industry as well. Yes, because a diesel engine's a diesel engine, a petrol engine's a petrol engine. I can't tell you like how many times I've spoken to a heavy diesel mechanic who works on mining equipment or pumps or etc., who started their career when they were younger or say in their early 20s as a mechanic's apprentice.
Right.
Yeah, actually, I can about 20.
So I assume there's really not any crossover between being an electric vehicle technician and some other job.
Well, for example, in Australia, just like heavy diesel mechanics working on, say, mining equipment or, engine-powered mining equipment, that's a direct crossover. The problem you run into with electric motors is they're normally used in fabrication and medium-scale industries, just because for the remote nature of mining and the remote nature of a lot of operations, you need the ability to have to use diesel or petrol just because of its energy density, because you can't run lines out to a place. And when they do actually use like 3-phase motors in a remote operation, it's being run off a diesel generator.
All right. Well,
it's just a hard physical limitation.
We can talk about also the fact that people involved in the evil fossil fuels industry are continuing to lose their jobs. So the most recent example that I came across was the axing of 125 jobs in Victoria for Sealy International. They're a gas company, so they're closing in this location, which is near the New South Wales border. And they did release a statement directly blaming the state government for it. So this is the decision to ban all gas connections in new homes from, well, it's already started, January 1st this year. So you cannot, same in ACT as well, actually. You cannot have a new gas connection made for a new home. You just can't do it. And yeah, they said that meant that it caused enormous volatility in demand. I assume he simply means demand dropped as a result of that. And yeah, I know it's only 125 people, but put that together with all the people who are losing their jobs in Collie, for example. You just keep seeing these small examples happening so often. They're really adding up. And no, these people are not getting retrained to be electric vehicle technicians. They're simply thrown on the unemployment scrap heap.
A growing discontent population. I love to hear it.
Just really quickly here on this one, I've already mentioned like the coalition all but confirming that they support nuclear power now. This has gotten the support from some people in industry. Not everyone. Like, obviously, I would imagine that Twiggy Forrest wouldn't be very happy about it because that would be a direct competitor for him. But how do you say this? Hotelier? Someone who runs hotels,
That sounds about right.
Hotelier. I don't know if that's kind of how it's spelt. I just don't know if I'm pronouncing it properly. But Jerry Schwartz.
Oh, Jesus.
Yes, one of our billionaires, perhaps our biggest hotelier, and he said that nuclear is a fantastic option for Australia's energy industry. So look, I simply just bring that up and say, oh, okay, so Jews are going to get involved in this as well, aren't they? And if there is anything dodgy, if anything dodgy turns up, yes, I am going to be that biased and say I think it's Jews.
Well, I hope they run the nuclear power plants better than they run their Section 8, like Section 8 equivalent rental properties in New York.
I certainly hope so too. I hope it doesn't involve tunnels at the foundation.
God.
Okay. All right. Next story, I was just going to kind of explain to people what the fuel efficiency standards are here. Well, actually, no, I'll read this anyway because it is. I've got some specifics here. So the Australian Chamber of Commerce estimated that fines imposed on car makers, so they refer to them as fines, the government might just refer to them as taxes, whatever it is, it's a cost placed on car makers. They've said that it's expected to be $100 per each gram of carbon dioxide per kilometre, in which their fleet exceeds the proposed ambitious targets. And that would add an average of $2,300 to the cost of an overseas vehicle imported into Australia. All right. So
Jesus.
it's another kind of carbon tax by stealth, really. They're just hitting a particular part of the economy, and it's going to make your gas guzzler more expensive.
We're about to find out how trickle-down economics really work. Again. If I had a nickel for every time that this happened, I would have 5 nickels, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it's weird that it happened 5 fucking times.
All right, so we'll get off climate and energy, and we'll move on to, the misinformation laws that we're all looking forward to. Now, Here I think this is one of the greatest indicators that these laws are going to be an overreach, a stretch, let's say, because originally you did have News Corp, to their credit, who were saying, obviously that these laws would result in stifling of free speech in Australia. So I'll give them credit there. But believe it or not, the ABC has actually come out recently and said the same thing. So the reason that they're giving this is because they don't believe that the legislation or the proposals as they currently stand don't adequately protect journalists and their right to use whistleblowers and things like that. So it could mean, because this, if you don't know, basically they want to give ACMA, the media regulator, new powers, and those powers include fines. So it doesn't really apply.
The fucking Ministry of fucking Truth already, please.
It basically is. ACMA is effectively going to turn into the Ministry of Truth. So they're saying that they're mainly targeting social media. They said that, by and large, if you run a respectable media outlet or whatever, then you'll be exempt. But News Corp and even the ABC now are saying, no, we don't think so. And we think that a journalist simply, putting forth a point of view in an opinion piece could there just be interpreted as misinformation or disinformation by ACMA and therefore fined. Or it could simply scare people into not writing that article in the first place, because they don't want to be the one to test these laws, so to speak.
And no one's going to want to. Everyone's going to be on fucking. Everyone's just going to have this, bunker mentality about it, at least for quite some time. And again, we saw over the past couple of years that things that turned out to be not only true but conspiratorial on the behalf of certain institutions were backed up as truth at the time by fabrications of trusted institutions.
Yeah, well, I mean, speaking of conspiracies, I know we brought up this example, but we really need to bring it up again. And when Albo was asked about these proposed changes last year in the Parliament by Peter Dutton, Albo decided to give an example of what would be considered misinformation. And therefore, whoever produced that misinformation would be subject to fines. And that was a poster, an online poster, I believe, that linked Jews to the establishment of an Indigenous voice to Parliament in Australia. And he used this as an example because he knew that this could not possibly be something that the coalition would oppose, being such a virulently philo-Semitic party.
Got him right by the fucking balls.
Yeah, well, look, I got to admit, on one hand, it was a good play by Albanese. But on the other hand, he showed exactly
something that was
what kind of information they would be going after. Yes, which is people like us. All right. And, he is right to say that even the coalition wouldn't be against censoring something like that, would they? I mean...
Okay, we're just going to start basing the show out of Russia.
The
I got 2 plane
coalition,
tickets.
the coalition were the ones pushing the government to go even further when it came to things like banning the Nazi salute and swastikas and all the rest. Because originally, Mark Dreyfus said he wanted to leave that in the hands of the states, because the states, like for Victoria, for example, have already moved to criminalise those activities. And then he was put under pressure by the coalition, and they changed it. So it's now illegal under Commonwealth law, which is why we had to crop the racer mascot.
Yes.
Yeah, so it affected us.
That's why I had to change my little icon in here as well.
Yeah. So, make no mistake, they would primarily be coming after us. And remember, we would fall under the correct category because obviously we're not like a media outlet, at least not what they would consider to be one. So ACMA would absolutely have the power to come and crack down on us. And
we've only got foreign correspondents.
Yeah, and you know what? When people get that desperate, like if they simply just start cracking down on pretty much any form of speech, whether it's putting up stickers or simply putting across your point of view on an internet radio show, that's when people really start to get blackpilled and say there is literally no political solution. All I can do now is, fight back a little bit against this system in some other way. All right? And unfortunately, that can mean violence. So,
and useless, pointless violence. And when I say like I'm in by no means in opposition to organizing and etc. But we're talking about the kind of violence that that one lawyer, what was her name, Rebecca Kaplan. She was, the Charlottesville lawyer. She was laughing and very gleeful that like Roberta. Sorry, I didn't remember that fucking that terrible goblin lady's name. She was gleeful that like she had created an environment in America where there was lone wolf shooters because that in her mind that meant that she'd won.
Yeah, because it shows desperation.
Yes.
What's the JFK quote? That's the one I'm trying to think of. Like when peaceful protest is made impossible, violent revolution becomes inevitable. I'm sure I'm paraphrasing that, but it's very true.
Something like that.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to health. And great timing. The government has allowed health insurers to raise their premiums on their customers by 3.03%. Now, I said good timing because they announced this the Monday after the Dunkley by-election. When we covered this last week, you might remember that the insurance companies were saying that Labor was deliberately delaying the announcement on premium rises until after the Dunkley by-election. The minister, Mark Butler, denied that, of course. He said he just wasn't taking a tick and flick approach and didn't want to waste it. But then it was literally the Monday, like 2 days after the Dunkley by-election, they announced the policy. So apparently, just a little bit on the detail, the insurance companies were lobbying the government to allow up to a 6% increase in premiums. So they're not getting that. 3.03. And yes, the government does impose a cap because, they do interfere when it comes to private health. We do have a mixed economy. And by the way, to all the Americans, if you're listening, we don't really have like what you guys call a socialized health system.
We got some weird shit.
Yeah, ours is a very weird mixed system. It's not like you guys have a much worse one though. Like you've got the one where your employer pays your health insurance. We don't have that. We just have like private health insurance that is heavily regulated by the government. With stuff like this, the government saying you can only raise premiums by X amount. So, yeah. And, the ambulance is not free when it comes to get you. And very often procedures like, I don't know, a biopsy or something, that's not free either. Like if you're
maybe subsidized, but it won't be free.
Yeah. If you're in a serious car crash, you'll pay for that ambulance. Maybe you'll get away with, you won't pay for, whatever surgery they do on you or whatever. But you will definitely pay some bills. That's guaranteed. It's not going to be free. All right. So let's go on to the economy and the cost of living. And, well, we've got some fun facts in this segment today. So apparently, Australians are losing $1 billion every year in card surcharges. So on your credit card, on your FPOS, when you've got to pay that pesky transaction fee, apparently we spend roughly $1 billion on that every year. And yeah, I mean, there is a cost to businesses for simply like running an ATM machine, running an FPOS machine. Not ATM machine, an FPOS, I should say. And it makes sense that they would then pass that down to the customers. Now, I hadn't heard of this before, but least cost routing, or LCR, this is a reserve bank scheme that aims to cut card payments, processing fees for businesses, and see savings therefore passed on to consumers. Now, the RBA has threatened to make LCR compulsory if the industry does not meet the target of 80% by the middle of the year. So they're expecting them to bring on LCR themselves. And I guess it all depends on how much of a cost that is to their industry. But at the very least, it looks like we're going to have that mandated anyway. So I guess you'll save a little bit more on your purchases because you won't have a surcharge. And yeah, it does add up. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the time we don't really think about it, when we constantly buy things with our credit card and all of that. It seems like a small amount when you make that single purchase, but it all adds up.
Yeah. I fucking hate credit cards.
I try to use mine as little as possible.
I hate debt. I hate credit cards, and yeah, I know. Like in a world where $1 a day is worth like an actual decent amount less tomorrow, but God, I still hate it.
Okay, now to talk a bit about superannuation.
Yes.
So we've got a couple stories on that today. The super industry estimates that $38 billion of early withdrawals during the pandemic is going to cost super fund members $85 billion in retirement savings. Okay, yep. Because, had that money stayed there, it would have accumulated interest, the compounds, etc. And that means they argue that a 20-year-old today will pay $3,000 more tax to top up the pensions of people who took money out of super early. Okay.
Yes.
And just, if you don't know what I'm talking about, during the pandemic, when the government was just freaking out and announcing things like JobSeeker and JobKeeper, they did allow people to dip into their superannuation fund, their retirement fund, early, when otherwise you are not allowed to actually touch that money until you retire. My idiot brother did that, and he actually cleaned out his fucking account, almost entirely.
Holy shit.
And that's the thing. It was all you started hearing all these stories about people who were just buying, they weren't actually in financial hardship. They're just oh, I can just get money now and buy a big TV. Great. Let's do that.
People buying high-end entertainment goods because a lot of them were just locked inside their houses. It's to some degree, there's some purchases that are understandable. Oh yeah, you've now put me in my fucking shoebox studio apartment, and I can't really go out or talk to anyone. So I'm going to buy X device to entertain myself for a little bit, so I don't go cabin crazy. But Some of it was just like, what the fuck are you doing?
Oh, I know. It was really silly. But look, that is why, yes, call me a bloody an authoritarian or whatever, but the government does need to exercise a degree of paternalism over something like this, because a retirement fund is a retirement fund. It's there for a reason. It's there so that you have as little as people as possible who go on the age pension when they retire, so that you can relieve that tax burden. It's very much a long-term economic policy. And if you screw things up in the short term, you'll screw them up long term. And that's what we're seeing. This isn't the first time we've read a story like this where we've got figures on, just how much it's going to cost us. It is bad. And every time we look at it, it seems to just get worse. So anyway, there's now calls also by the industry to actually further regulate the accessing of super, because even though the pandemic is over now, you still can access your super in the case of hardship. You can argue you have economic hardship of some description. You've got to prove that, obviously, but the industry, the super industry, is basically telling the government, no, don't even let them do that. Like, it's just too risky, because you're just going to keep pilfering the fund. Almost to the point where there's no point in having a scheme anymore, because you'll just end up paying the same amount on the pension long term.
You see very similar like ideas and memes coming out of the States too. It's just like me watching a quarter of my paycheck, or like X% of my paycheck disappear into Social Security, knowing full well that by the time I get to the age of retirement, Social Security will not be a thing. And it's that scene from like when they played off Paul Walker's death in that one fucking Fast and the Furious fucking movie.
I've only seen the first.
Trust me, you're not missing much.
I wish I hadn't seen that.
Yeah, no, but yeah, no, it's you're getting actually a very similar sentiment over here when it comes to superannuation, because it's literally like, okay, well, you've already just said that the youth of today are going to be paying a higher tax rate on these kinds of things, will be taxed more, or we'll have to maybe deal with a job that might, depending on how they actually legislate this, and there's going to be no clean, nice way to do it, unfortunately. That they're basically realizing that by the time that they get to the point of being 60, this place will be so much of an economic zone solely, that policies and protections, etc., that were afforded to the generation before will not exist in any meaningful way for them.
Yes. No, absolutely. And that's why, like, I say that when I die or like go into retirement or whatever, I want to be in like an Irania style community, where people genuinely care about me. Hopefully I would also have a lot of money to, fund that all myself as well. But I really hope I'm like kind of living among a community like that, and not just expecting the government to look after me, because there's no way I'm expecting that. Not when I'm growing up in an anti-white system that hates me.
Do you have no faith, Finian? Absolutely no faith in our state, Finian? Oh, I could never agree with you on that.
No, I mean, I increasingly just think that like small autonomous white communities that operate almost exclusively off the grid seems to be the only kind of future we'll have for white society.
And there's going to need to be some definite steps towards that, because honestly, that is really our only option at this point.
Yeah, and I mean, Irania is doing well, and I really, really hope I get to visit Irania one day. It'll be like a pilgrimage. Love to go there. Okay, so we've got some figures out on productivity as well. So the Federal Productivity Commission has numbers on the financial year of 2022 to 2023. Now, just to put into context here, obviously we had a sharp decline in productivity during COVID, as every country did. And we also had a sharp increase in productivity once we got the economic wheels going again. Now, ever since things have sort of, gone back or gone to the new normal, as we might want to call it. And that sugar hit to the economy where we opened up the borders again, once that sort of wore off, productivity again plunged. Now, not to COVID levels, but to still, historical levels. And this has actually been a general trend over the last 30 years. Despite the fact that GDP goes up, despite the fact we're told standards of living are going up, for some reason, productivity goes backwards all the time. And, that basically means like your bang for your buck. Like, how much are you getting out of the labor that is input and whatever it is that you have produced as a result? And every opposition always harangues the government in power over productivity figures, because they always just reach a new low every year. So, yeah, I mean, I could have said all of this without looking at the new productivity report, because every year it is actually just the same thing every time with them.
Yeah.
You're definitely not going to increase productivity by importing cheap labor. All right. If you hadn't guessed what I think the cause of that is. If you would
especially like if we still had like fucking retard industries here, like fucking like metal, like and I don't want to be insulting. I just want to say like, base, like low industrial, medium industrial, and sometimes heavy industrial industries. And people who work in the sector will probably agree with me on this. I've even spoken to oil field workers about this. If we had those industries here, maybe, but we're a hollowed out post-industrial country, not by our own choice, and not by even our suggestions, because having industry here would be probably good, at least maybe sometime in the future. But because we're basically like small end mining and then a service economy kind of attached onto it like a fucking gallbladder, we're literally just getting that just to be more consumer mass. That's it. We're not getting it for productivity. We're getting it for like more people purchasing in the market.
Yeah, it's all part of the population Ponzi, which eventually does backfire in the end.
It does shit the bed.
But unfortunately, businesses don't think that long term. They'll only go by their financial quarters. So they've got a short term incentive to just keep lining their own pockets by paying cheap brown labor, by not investing in skilled labor, the actual kind that does boost productivity, and just fingers crossed that it'll just keep going forever. But it won't go forever. It'll fucking collapse and we'll turn into a third world shithole.
Oh, some parts of this country we have. I was actually asked, have we passed the crime section already? I think we have.
The what?
The crime section.
No, we haven't.
No, we haven't. Okay, I'll leave it for there. But again, talking about third worldism and third world results. My God, do we have stuff for you in there?
Yeah, we do. Real triggering stuff today. Yeah. Okay, so the other story we had on Super was that when you get paid parental leave now, when you get paid by the government to go and look after a newborn baby, you're actually going to receive superannuation payments on top of that. So Katie Gallagher, who is the Women's Minister, she said by the way, it's International Women's Day today. Do you know that?
Yes, and by the way, the Australian government has a minister for handling women moments. That's definitely what that position is for. Don't look it up.
Absolutely. And she's one of the nasty girls. Or mean girls. That's what they call them.
Mean girls. Oh, yeah. The one that bullied that one into suicide.
Well, bullied her into having, like, irregular heartbeat. That was Linda Reynolds.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah.
I retract my statement. I was wrong.
All right, what was I? So Katie Gallagher did announce, so there's a plan to increase nearly $900 a week payments by 12%, which will go into superannuation accounts. So that would be for 180,000 parents per year. Okay. you can obviously see that the flip side of that is, I don't have it in front of me, but Sky News are basically saying this is going to cost too much and we're going to be put further into debt. Now, the other day, actually, I saw Paul Murray citing some figures that apparently said that the trajectory that Labor is putting us on with our current rate of spending is actually going to create 40 years of budget deficits. I don't know about that, considering even after the huge, massive spending that we had during COVID, Jim Chalmers was able to produce a small, but still a surplus budget. So I never believe these outlandish figures like that. But still, yeah, I mean, it is hard for them to rein in spending when you're splashing around money like this. And just lastly, even though the coalition did push through the stage 3 tax cuts, or the new version of it by Labor, they have not ruled out that they'll just go back on that if they are elected. So they would still keep aspects of it, so for example, the additional tax cuts that Labor gave to low and middle income earners, they would keep those, and which would be pretty smart. That'd be pretty close to political suicide if you went backwards on that. However, they would also apply further tax cuts to the rich, which I think in this one, the tax bracket was anyone over 190 grand a year. They wanted to give them an additional tax cut as well. So, yeah. I don't know. I don't really care as long as they keep the low and income tax cuts. I think were a good idea, and as long as they keep those in, I don't have a huge objection to it. Okay, we got some figures on housing, on the housing crisis. So the national vacancy rate, that is a house that has no one living in it, has hit a record low of 0.7%, according to Domain. Even though you still hear people complaining about property owners who leave their house idle without renting it out or whatever, it is, very low, this figure at 0.7%. Now, one thing I'd say, one little caveat I'd love to throw in here, though, is that if you run an Airbnb, that would mean it's not a vacant property. And a lot of the Airbnbs are only full 2 months of the year. And the rest of the year, they're empty. So that maybe has skewed the figures a little bit. And Labor did even talk about how they want to crack down on that, because I think they're just going after it for the tax benefits, which is probably true.
Anytime I've seen a country actually go after Airbnbs and etc., they've gone and cracked down. There's been some big uproar. Normally this only really actually gets implemented in smaller countries where there is a smaller amount of Airbnbs and therefore a smaller amount of Airbnb owners and again, related political influence. But where it's happened, fuck all's change.
Right. And further to
I'm
that,
even talking about some countries that are just considered holiday countries themselves in that case. So, for example, Greece, Croatia, to a small degree, Hungary. But I'm relatively small countries, and I don't mean that in an offensive way to those people from there. But the crackdown is done for coal. So it's an extrapolation, it's an interpolation on my behalf, but I probably believe that it's going to do fuck all if we just went around and fucking publicly domained all the fucking Airbnbs in this country and filled them full of Indians.
I know. I'm just saying that, maybe that 0.7% is a little misleading. That's all. But still,
it's still horrendously low.
That is an extremely low figure,
yes.
Whatever way you slice it, definitely. So look, further to that, in Perth and Adelaide, in some areas it's 0.3%, which that's basically zero. It basically means there's no such thing as an empty house.
There's no vacancy.
Yeah, in Perth or Adelaide, in parts of Perth or Adelaide.
Hey, you look at a hotel and it says on its website it's got 0.3% vacancy. You're going to try and make a booking?
But look, Yeah, I highlighted something here in my prep because this was something that pissed me off about this article. They, like, of course, when they were citing these figures, they want to come up with explanations as to why. And they said, while immigration is a contributing factor to the housing crisis, well, I'll quote it here. It says, perhaps the biggest problem is a shortage of supply, and that sluggishness has been brought into sharp focus by the latest Bureau of Statistics building approval data. Well, okay, yeah, nuggets of truth in that. That's true. We've talked about that as well.
Our country's been approving any fucking building that could be fucking manufactured at this point.
Yeah, I mean, we covered that story about councils actually implementing AI to fast track approvals. So, yes. Yeah, it's not that. It's just because we have no fucking building industry at the moment.
We've been fucking fleeced. Even if we had some kind of like super idealistic building industry, we'll literally be raping the fucking country to the ground and destroying every single metro center in this entire fucking country to achieve parity of supply, the amount of demand the immigration fucking situation is putting in our hands.
Yeah.
600,000, 400,000, an extra couple million by the end of an extra couple million by the end of the decade. Now that's fucking terrifying in a nation of fucking 27 million now, isn't it? Yeah, like what the fuck is going on?
Yeah, and yeah, I just kind of know also, like, in Perth it is really bad at the moment, and
we've got the elementary school math equation from hell when it comes to our fucking housing industry.
Yeah, like Perth genuinely is, as was proven in those figures I just read out. Ours is as low as 0.3%. Ours is like quite possibly the worst in the country. It's not just Sydney and Melbourne who are bursting at the seams with too many people. It's us as well, and it's Adelaide. It's basically everywhere. There is no escape. Every time you try to move to a smaller area, eventually that is going to be overpopulated with brown people. Okay. All right, so just quickly, the CPSU, which is our Public Servants Union, they're going to be negotiating and trialing a 4-day work week. So this is something.
Jesus Christ.
They're trialing because they've got workers who work at Oxfam, and they're kind of working with them to implement this trial where they're going to have people, only working 4 days a week. And they said something about like they're going to work smarter at the same time so that they can apparently get the same amount of productivity in with less hours. Okay. Look, I'm all for like, working out your work-play balance in your life and, spending more time.
We're big supporters of Henry Ford over here.
But then there's a point where you're just being a lazy cunt, and I would say working 4 days a week is probably in that category. So
yeah, again, like ask anyone who lives in the fucking ACT their opinions on public servants and what they do during their extended lunch breaks and what they actually do during work hours. Is working smarter actually fucking working? I'm sorry. I'll put my biases on the table. I hate public servants.
Yeah, well, look, in their case, public servants always get a hard time because, if you watch The Wog Boy, like, Stephen Curry's character is like, I'll show you how to jam the photocopiers and look like you're busy when you're not and all this. There's an idea that public servants can get away with slacking off, like, actively. And that's
it's not as bad as that. Well, not in most cases, but like,
not quite, no.
Yeah, no, I would have a lot more sympathy for you if the general like ideology and ideations of a public servant was anything within a fucking country mile of mine.
Sure, yeah. And so it's not surprising that it's the public service who are planning this. It's like, how can we work even less? Let's try this new plan and see if it works. All right, so we'll move on to Aborigines and crime. Just quick, I actually really only had one story related to Aborigines this week, and that was the rate of methamphetamine use is continuing to rise. So this time they're citing concerns in Derby, which is in the northwest of the country. And they're saying that there's an increased supply and therefore an increased use going on. And, I often think meth is the worst drug because it's the drug that most affects innocent people because it makes people violent. Generally speaking, if you're a heroin junkie or something, you're going to affect yourself and maybe
you're going to be passed out in the corner. You're not going to be doing shit to anyone.
Yeah. If you're on meth, you're lit up like a light bulb and you have basically violent energy within you.
Yes.
And burn off that violent energy by assaulting people around you, which can mean nurses, basically the whole reason why they have signs up. It's amazing in hospitals. They have signs up saying, do not assault our staff. That's meth heads. Usually non-white meth heads doing that kind of shit. So, giving Aborigines a sugar hit of violent energy is certainly not something that you want. No way.
Now you've seen Aboriginals passed out in the streets, nursing a hangover, or laid out in the middle of the pathway because they've passed out from the amount of benzenes they've just huffed from that petrol can.
But that's
have you ever seen a meth-fueled Aboriginal rage? Now that's what I call warriors of Aboriginal resistance.
Well, again, a recent episode we covered how meth is coming into the Torres Strait from Papua New Guinea. That's one of the great things Papua New Guinea gives us. That's how much our partnership is worth with them. They flood the northeast of Australia with methamphetamine.
We send them shit tons of money. They send us shit tons of that pure crystal.
Yeah, but look, we know that we could stop this because it stopped during COVID. In fact, that was something that Mark McGowan bragged about. When he was selling the hard border and why it was needed, he didn't just cite the need to keep out COVID. He also mentioned how rates of methamphetamine use had reduced because drug cartels were being denied a trading zone in WA, and that's absolutely true. Now, I'm not saying go back to a COVID hard border, but I mean, surely you could better utilize the border force and police to stop these drugs from coming in the first place. I don't think they're doing enough in that regard. Okay, so we'll move on to crime. So this is turning into be somewhat of a hot button issue in Tasmania. It's not going to be as hot button as in Queensland, where that is just people have white hot rage over what's going on in Queensland at the moment.
Oh,
but
God.
The Liberals are, I guess you can see the basic left-right distinctions here. According to the ABC anyway, the Liberals are going with a crackdown approach, while Labor is focusing on diversion programs. Now, however, when you actually analyse what their specific policies are, you look at the Ashley Youth Detention Centre, which is Tasmania's only detention centre for young people. That was actually going to close this year. Remember, it's a Liberal government, the only Liberal government we've got in the country at the moment. But that has been extended, and now they're not even telling us when it will be closed, and neither is Labor, because obviously Labor supported that move as well to close it down, but now they won't even commit to a date as to when that will be shut down. Now, dare I say, it's because you can't have a state that literally has no youth detention centre. You just can't do it. How the fuck could you do that? That's basically, you have no jail for young people at all, whatsoever. What the hell are you going to do with them? So they need to build a new one. And as far as I know, that hasn't been announced. So no wonder they're delaying the closure of it, because they're just not going to have anywhere to put juveniles. Which is also the silly thing about what's going on in the Northern Territory at the moment. They're promising to close Dondale. And there's even rumours that they're going to close Banksia Hill here in Perth, even though they did a big upgrade of it. So it's really dumb. And what we're going to have here, I predict anyway, if the Liberals win this election, and they might, I don't think we're going to see any major changes. I think you'll only see major changes if you start to see the kind of, horrific stuff that we're seeing in Queensland at the moment. Because suddenly they get the political will when there is burning rage in the electorate, That's the only reason that Labor capitulated somewhat in Queensland, because people are just absolutely burning with anger over what's going on there, and rightly so. So we'll wait and see. Anyway, part of this platform from the Liberals is they want to have a crackdown on, I'd never heard this term before, but crimfluencers. So you're a crimfluencer if you go out and commit crimes, film them and glorify them and post them on the internet. So we know that our Indigenous friends love doing that. TikTok, I believe, is their platform of choice, where they not only upload the videos of them, say, stealing cars, but they dare other people to beat them, like beat their record in how many cars they stole that night or something. So if you have taken part in videoing and promoting your crime, then that would be seen as an aggravating factor. In other words, you'd be sentenced more as a result of that. So that apparently is one of the, tough on crime approach policies that the Liberals do have. They also said they would recruit more police, toughen penalties for hooning, road rage and theft, and they would deploy a strike force to target serial criminals. Okay, I mean, look...
Well, I feel personally attacked by one of those things. I believe that road rage is a human right.
Yeah, but
if you cut me off, it is my God-given inalienable rights to go in and break
them. They're not talking about beeping your horn or yelling at someone. Like, road rage is when you... A lot of the time, people try to, run you off the road. I've seen it happen.
Oh, yeah.
Because they want you to pull over so they can yell at you. They try to do shit.
I remember, I lived in a particularly methed out neighborhood a few years back. Well, more than a few years back at this point, thank God. But, there was this one time where some dude who was literally, doing the, I saw in my rearview mirror him just doing the jaw rotation thing that they do. The I've got seriously bad cottonmouth type deal.
Oh, like grinding.
Yeah, the thing where they roll their jaw over.
Yeah.
And I was being again, this is how I know they're on meth. They were in a fucking tiny hatchback trying to run a 4-wheel drive that was about 3 times their mass off the road. I was like, if you ram into me, I'm not going anywhere. You're being pushed into the fucking median.
Did you actually do something like cut them off, or?
No. I think just pulling up next to them was probably bad enough, because I was leaving an industrial area with 3 lanes, so I wasn't even in contact with this person.
Man, yeah, you just reminded me. I used to work on a building site bloody years ago, and I remember there was this guy who was known for being, into the meth, and I believed it as well, because looking at him, he looked about 10 years old. Yeah, he looked about 10 years older than what he was, and he had missing teeth. And he was scrawny as all fuck. But I remember one day I saw him get into his car, and he had a sticker on his car, and it said CUNT, cash up front, no tick. You know what that means? I'm a drug dealer, and you pay the money up front. I'm not giving it to you on tick. I thought, yeah, okay. All right. That's a good way for the cops to notice you, I think, you fucking idiot. Yeah. Oh, right. So, Zachary Rolfe.
Terrible news.
So, Zachary Rolfe took the stand. Zachary Rolfe, remember, is the guy who killed Kumanjai Walker, because Kumanjai Walker stabbed him with a pair of scissors about 3 times. Go watch the body cam footage if you don't believe me.
attacked a previous police officer with a hatchet.
That's right. Yeah, he actually chased them away with an axe.
Yeah.
So anyway, there had already been a trial for Zachary Rolfe. He was acquitted. He was found not guilty. And that's absolutely not surprising. I went and watched the body cam footage in full. You can actually see after he shoots him, he performs CPR on him. Seems a bit strange that you would perform CPR on a guy you were trying to murder. But
and then also anyway. Discovery was used as an opportunity to lambast his character.
Okay, yeah. So that's what we'll get into here. The Guardian actually loved this. They wrote this huge piece on it the other day, a hit piece, in other words, and it's to do with it's to do with partly what they call the racist culture within the Northern Territory police force, and I do actually agree with them to an extent because they wanted readers to kind of ponder the question. Is Zachary Rolfe simply a racist, or is he more the product of a racist subculture that exists within the Northern Territory police? And I guess, they kind of want you to believe both. Both is true. They want to demonize him and the police force at the same time. So, sorry, by the way, this is an inquest into the death of Kumanjai Walker, which is completely erroneous. It should not happen. Whatever. Like I said, we've already had the trial. The coroner already made findings on the death of Kumanjai Walker. There is absolutely no need for an inquest. They're only doing it because of the public pressure that is there and how they want to just continuously destroy the life of Zachary Rolfe, whose professional life has already been destroyed. He did it.
Gone.
Yeah, I mean, I got to give him props for staying on. Like, I thought surely he's going to quit the force, but he actually stayed on, but eventually they dismissed him for bullshit. So anyway, I'll go through the points that The Guardian made here about stuff that was brought up to Zachary Rolfe and they questioned him about. So the idea that he repeatedly used racist language. Okay, I've seen this. He used the word coon about 3 times in text messages, and there were literally hundreds of text messages that they went through. And yeah, that word came up, I believe it was like 2 or 3 times. That was it. He apparently snubbed the rules about body-worn video cameras. So there was one occasion where he filmed something himself, like he turned on a body cam when it wasn't supposed to be put on, I think. And there was actually footage of him laughing at it. Like they were watching the footage back at a police station and him and his friends were laughing because they pushed 2 Aborigines over. You then hear Zachary Rolfe say, we better give them an infringement to justify the use of force. So, they zoomed in on that and kind of said, oh, look at that. That means that, they're only giving him an infringement so that they can get off the hook for pushing them over. Well, that still doesn't mean that the use of force wasn't justified. And, you only see a very small amount of the footage. But, look, for all we know, they were probably violent. They were probably drunk or on drugs. And, I'd have a hard time believing the use of force was not justified in those circumstances. So, specifically on the culture, the racist culture that exists within the Northern Territory, Zachary Rolfe did actually kind of say that this culture exists. He said that racist language was normalized in the Alice Springs police station. He said that he heard racial slurs on a daily basis. There was also apparently a mock award handed out to the Territory's elite policing unit to the officer who behaved most like an Aboriginal. And I believe the police commissioner, or it was someone senior within the police force anyway, apparently said, no, that's not true. So, I don't know. That might have just been like a little thing that only a few coppers did. I don't know. So, yeah, I would say that to an extent, I do agree with The Guardian when they say that this was a culture that existed with Northern Territory Police. But I'll just say, all right, but what creates that culture in the first place? Is it because these people go in with hardened racist views and they want to go in and make the lives of Aboriginal people hell? Or is it because that they simply interact with them on a daily basis and realize that the vast majority of the crime that they deal with, and if you're located in one of these remote communities like Zachary Rolfe was, it is pretty much 100% of your workload is dealing with Aborigines. It is pretty much 100%. It just begs the question.
It is the workload. It is not even fucking 100%.
Yeah, that is your job is Abo cop. Okay, you are there.
Abo babysitter. You are a babysitter.
You're babysitting them because, and you know, if they really did want them all to die, they would just leave them to their own devices, and then they can stab each other with hatchets and scissors instead of cops. You know, that's what they would do. So, like, yeah, I completely, I do agree. I'm like, yeah, like racism, as in racial stereotypes being believed, you know, pattern recognition being taken into account, and therefore predicting certain kinds of behaviour by people of a particular racial group absolutely does exist within the Northern Territory Police Force. No doubt about that whatsoever. And I just also say...
haven't lobotomized them yet.
Yeah. Like, so that's on like the one point is, how could it not be? How could you not have a job like that and not be racist? But also, I'd like to know from The Guardian, does that necessarily result in dead Aborigines? As I just said, these people are, well, you're putting it as, you know, babysitting them, and yeah, that's true to a large extent. And that is what's actually helping them stay alive. They are saving them from themselves. They are stopping them from killing each other. So I don't agree that when they come in to police their communities, that, you know, these racist attitudes towards them is detrimental. If anything, it allows them to modify their own behaviour to deal with the Aboriginal population correctly, because you can't deal with them like you do with a white population. We know that they're more violent, they're more prone to erratic and compulsive behaviour, and therefore the police adapt to that and adapt their policing methods so that they can police these areas with as little force as possible. So I don't agree with The Guardian that, like, you know, racism automatically equals like more dead outcomes. People. Yeah. I don't see that whatsoever. You have to see that they are a different breed of people and act accordingly. And if you don't, you've either been lobotomized or you're just a fucking idiot.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, that's the largest conceit that you know, that there is this, like, you know, supreme, completely unusable type of analysis.
Right. Now, another story still on Northern Territory Police. Their police minister, his name is Brett Potter. And even though it's a Labor government at the moment, believe it or not, this guy actually posted some social media posts. I think they were just on Facebook.
Oh, yeah. ABC has been raking him over the coals for this. I think some of them date back to 2011 or 2010.
2016. It was 11 years. Yeah. They're saying 11 years ago. That's obviously not 11 years ago, but okay, no, since 11 years ago. But yeah, the one in 2016 was one of Field Marshal Erwin Rommel. So this was a social media post, like a meme,
a respectable Field Marshal.
Yeah. In the absence of orders, go find something and kill it. So the ECAJ, that's right, the Jewish lobby, described the post as not acceptable and that it could glamorize figures associated with the Nazi regime responsible for the deaths of 6 million Jews.
Rommel the Desert Fox deserves to be glamorized because, by fucking God, imagine being so fucking far away from your country and still fighting a reasonably successful campaign with tanks.
Man, I still have Trail of the Fox by David Irving, which is the biography of Rommel on my bookshelf. I have not read it. I promise I will get to it one day, though. David Irving books are always great. But no, this guy also had another post where it was a video of a right-wing commentator, quote, destroys Black Lives Matter with simple logic. I was like, well, hold on a sec. This guy's a bloody Labour minister now for the Northern Territory Labour government. Like, what?
How the fuck did you get here?
What happened? Yeah, but I mean, what? Obviously, this guy showed some, certainly some right-leaning tendencies in his earlier years, and yet he became the bloody Labour police minister in the Northern Territory. What happened to you, dude? Because isn't that's so rare to like go in the other direction? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like very common for someone on the left to change their view and turn right. But like the opposite, that almost never happens.
I can only see opportunism. Or I can only see opportunism.
Yeah. Oh, there's got to be some explanation for it. But yeah, I find that bizarre. So yeah, I mean, naturally the post taken down. He's apologized for them. And he said... It's not the
person I am now.
Well, yeah, no, that's what he said. He said that they do not accurately represent his current political views. So, yeah. All right. So Queensland has just passed laws to criminalise coercive control. So that is control, a pattern of control which can include isolation, intimidation, sexual coercion, and cyber stalking. According to the ABC, survivors have described coercive control as intimate terrorism or living in torture. Now, it's funny, they didn't include the word financial in that description because my understanding basically is that a lot of the time this is where you have a relationship that's on the rocks. You still have like man and woman living in the same house, but because they're effectively separated, the man, cuts the woman off financially because he's the main breadwinner, and all of a sudden, he doesn't want to share his money with her anymore. That, very often, is what they call coercive control. Simply the fact that, the woman is not getting her pocket money anymore. Which is like you expect it, like that would naturally happen, wouldn't it? During a relationship breakdown, particularly if there are no kids involved, the man is obviously going to be less likely to hand his money over. But,
yeah, I'll say this as well. Like, there's like, aren't we meant to, live in this age of, like financial freedom for women that can engage in the workplace? Why would this be a sticking point?
Yeah, that's it. And yeah, I mean, it still does show that we don't have the same numbers of women in the workforce as we do with men. And no matter how hard we try, we can't make the genders equal. I think that's what that shows, And
how about this? Equal but different.
Yeah, I like. Man, who said that once? Actually, it was Varg Vikernes. He said we're equal, but we're different. Now, I would say, yeah, like, are we equal in value? Sure. I'll even be that egalitarian who says that. But we are absolutely not the same in terms of our behaviour. No way.
I don't even like equality as as a base metric. It's like equal in what regard? Equal where? Equal in what situation? There's way too many variables to just be so universal with that term.
I know.
Equal in a sinking ship? Definitely not.
Okay, so last story on crime. Well, you've got something as well. So this last one I've got is, faith leaders have recently met with the Minns government in New South Wales to relax laws for what they referred to as needless and disastrous interactions with criminal justice as a result of drug use. So there's meant to be an upcoming drug summit in New South Wales where they're just kind of selling this as like one of these public forums where they decide on what approach to take to decriminalisation, because that has all but been promised by Chris Minns. because if you look at it, I believe that New South Wales still kind of has some of the harshest drug laws, or certainly in terms of possessing drugs. The laws are quite harsh. But yeah, so there was a letter that was sent, one of these open letters, was sent to Chris Minns. And this had leaders from the Jewish, Anglican, Catholic, Uniting, and Muslim communities, all urging the state government to move faster in decriminalising drugs. So they said, as leaders of faith in our communities, we see the impact of drug dependency on individuals and their families. We also see the impact of criminalisation and stigma and the pain this causes. So yeah, I found this kind of interesting. I mean, obviously you wouldn't say that religious groups are pro-drug, of course not, like the Greens are. But they just kind of think that completely criminalising the issue can cause some damage. And yeah, look, I'm not Duterte either. I think that the whole drug issue should be treated simultaneously as a criminal problem and a health problem. And yeah, like I don't agree with, like, say, killing people who were carrying some weed on them or something, like Duterte did. Throwing him out of a helicopter or whatever it might be. So that's fine. But I'm also just thinking, I think this is also just because of the fact that there was a time when these laws simply applied to some white guy who had a foil of mull in his pocket or something. Now it's happening so often because you've got so many Lebanese and other, lower racial castes who use drugs at much, much higher rates than everyone else. So, yeah, if you've ever taken a walk through King's Cross, you know what I'm talking about.
Of course. I've just posted the story that I wanted to talk about in the side chat.
Okay. You can introduce it though if you want. I'm just
okay, perfect.
Oh yes, I'm glad you brought this. Yes, I forgot to put this in the prep. Yeah, go ahead.
I scrolled through. I was like, okay, this one's missing. This one strikes a bit closer home as it is in Perth, specifically Greenwood. We're talking about a grandfather, 81 years of age, and his 75-year-old wife being attacked by a 19-year-old, very fresh to this country as well. He has an African name. I'm going to try and pronounce it.
Impronounceable name.
Yes, Pasir Zawadi Niyoshi. Not Japanese. He's actually from West Africa, Central West Africa. But yeah, basically this person was known to be a problem in the area, had already assaulted the couple before, and had assaulted other members in the community, including, I believe, basically as a caretaker of the home that he's in. Also, he's one of those quote-unquote 19-year-olds that might not be a 19-year-old.
Okay.
Yeah. It's alleged on my behalf. That's just from looking at him and also from being in that part of the world for a period of time and knowing how those people look at a certain period of age. But yeah, basically it was a stabbing, and then also like a brutal beating of this 75-year-old woman.
He died of head injuries mainly.
Yes. Yeah, basically it was a curb stomping, just to put it bluntly. But one of the big things is this is now one of many cases. Obviously, we talked about the stabbing of a grandmother only a few weeks ago. We've actually seen a whole bunch of other crimes spread out. It's being deleted off of Twitter as we now speak, and now there's been accusations of a hate campaign or a scare campaign being leveraged against the Murdoch media for even talking about these things. These are now an ongoing issue. We're seeing things that we saw back in, say, 2019 with the Sudanese over in Richmond, Victoria. We're seeing the exact same things now play out here in Western Australia. Not that this is the first case, and unfortunately not that this will be the last case.
They're covering it up now.
Yes, they are.
Because what happened in Queensland actually did attract a fair bit of media attention. And as a result, yes, it did stir up racial tensions as well, as it naturally would. And I think when this story happened, when this 81-year-old man was killed, the media said, well, we don't want to cause the same reaction as last time. So, yeah, this seemed to be like it got a bit of coverage in West Australian media, but not really anywhere else. Not many people have heard of this. In fact, I forgot to put it in the fucking prep.
Yeah. Again, that's how much it's been well shielded. Now, again, the community of Greenwood absolutely knows about this. There's been similar attacks everywhere from Ellenbrook to Joondalup at this point.
Yeah, they love the northern suburbs, don't they? Like Mirrabooka.
Yes, they do.
Alga. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're seeing this new resurgent wave. Especially, it's kind of an odd thing to see this over here in Western Australia, because we're still at this point dealing with the 30, 40 something African that just came over here. But now we have this too.
Yeah, we do. So, I mean, look, he might be a fresh off the boat type, but, it's the youth are always the main problem. That's when people tend to, be at the peak of their criminal career, if that's the path they choose. And like I always say, even though this wouldn't have applied to this kid, the second generation is always worse. The ones who are actually born here are worse. They do feel isolated, and why wouldn't they? It's not their culture, although it's increasingly looking like it fucking is. But also, they're grown up in comfort and in a culture that tells them that white people are evil. So,
and what should they do with that information?
Yeah, and this is what they do. This is exactly what they do with that information. Okay. All right, so let's go to some state politics. The WA Liberal Party. So Steve Thomas, we covered last week, he had to resign the deputy leadership and from the front bench because some emails were leaked between him and Brian Burke, the man who you just never want to be caught communicating with in any way whatsoever.
The human sieve.
Yes. So only days after he was put to the backbench, he's back on the front bench already. Now, this isn't really because they've had a sudden change of heart. It's because they just don't have any choice in the Liberal Party. You know how many are in the lower house for the Libs in WA? 3. So when it came to all the shadow portfolios that he had, he was already managing about 6 of them. So it was pretty hard to then go and handball all of those to the pitiful few who remained in Parliament. So they just immediately had to bring him back to the front bench. I thought that was kind of funny. Now, the rebuild of the Liberal Party, that's what they have to call it because that's what it is. They've probably already written off the next election. They'll be focusing on the one after, when they have Holy Basil Zemplis at the leadership. That's what I think will happen anyway. But yeah, the rebuild has been dealt a blow because Matthias Cormann's wife, Hayley Cormann, has been nudged out of the pre-selection process. Now, not only is she the wife of someone who was a high-profile minister, Matthias Cormann was the finance minister, she's also a high-profile barrister. So, if you work in law, or if you've got a knowledge of the legal profession in WA, you would have heard of Hayley Cormann. But yeah, again, the factions are at it, and she was turfed out. So that's interesting because, as far as I know, Matthias Cormann is kind of from the centre faction of the Liberal Party. So he was more like Scott Morrison. He wasn't a hard writer like Tony Abbott, but he wasn't a soft moderate like Malcolm Turnbull either.
No.
yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the factions kind of further sort that out. So 2 senior advisors have left the Victorian Liberal Party, and apparently, well, I'll give their names. So there was Chief of Staff Rodrigo Pintos Lopez and the Director of Communications Nick Johnston. Now, they have only been in their respective jobs for a year, or a little over a year. And while there's not really any official reason for them leaving, it's believed they resigned because they don't like what's going on at the moment with the defamation action that's being brought by Moira Deeming. And they just don't like the bloody the conservative position that John Pesutto is leading the Victorian Liberals into. Tasmania. Well, the Libs are being accused of pork barrelling, which of course is where you give grants to certain electorates in a bid to win over voters, so that you can win marginal seats. Pork barrelling really only occurs in marginal seats. And the reason for this is because there have been leaked internal Tasmanian Liberal Party forms that are actually showing they're basically their applications to apply for funding from the Liberal Party. So it was actually pretty blatant that you could put in these requests, and the Liberals could kind of get an idea of the kind of facilities that people were looking for in these marginal seats, and hopefully hit them with a bit of bribe money before the election starts, which is only 3 weeks away, I believe.
Well, let's see if they're still on the fucking roster for that.
Okay. 2 weeks away. Yeah, it's on the 23rd. Yeah, it's on the 23rd. It's quite soon. Oh, that means we'll have to do a race that decides for that. We probably won't do a live one, I don't think. Probably. Sorry, Tasmania, but you're not that important. But we'll do a wrap up. Okay. Oh, actually, this was probably my favourite story from state politics this week. It involves Stephen Miles, the Queensland Premier. So last year during question time, there was a member of the Labor Party who got into a bit of trouble during question time. Now, who was this? It's King. I'm sorry, I'm just looking for her name. Her last name is King. I'm sorry, I don't know Queensland politics that well. Ali King. So she was questioned over, she got some kind of hardball questions from the opposition. And she was basically told that she should apologise to the Parliament. This is what it was. She actually made a social media post saying that people who were interested in working in the health industry could actually email their resumes to her office directly. Now, that's a pretty unusual thing for a politician to do, isn't it?
Oh, Jesus.
Saying, hey, you want a job in the public sector? Email me directly. Huh? So, yes, the Liberal Party questioned her over that. She initially did not apologise. Now, at the time, Stephen Miles was the deputy leader and Anastasia Palaszczuk was the premier. But what happened during this particular question time was that Stephen Miles actually sent Ali King a text message saying, hey, can you get up and call attention to yourself and then actually make a additional statement, a matter of privilege, and you're going to apologize for what you just for that behavior, for telling people to send their resumes directly to your office. So it was basically him texting her live advice during question time saying, hey, your last answer was not good enough. You should just publicly apologize. Can you do that? Recently, Stephen Miles was asked in question time after a photo was leaked. So a photo of him sending the text message. So the photo was actually able to see his screen. So, it must have been a good zoom in. That was actually revealed by Channel 9. So originally, Stephen Miles had just completely denied this. He said, "What do you mean? I don't send text messages, giving question time advice during question time. I would never do that." Well, then that photo got out there by Sky News, 9 News, sorry. And he had to get up and he had to apologise for it to Parliament. And he looked
how the tables have turned.
Yeah, he looked very twitchy, like he looked nervous when he was giving this, but he did not say that this was, that he lied, that he deliberately misled the Parliament. Instead, he said he forgot. He said it was just he lost his recollection of it. Oh, God. And so that then prompted people in the Labor Party to say, hold on, where the hell did this photo come from? Well, we know now who it was. So it was a member of the LNP, Michael Crandon. So he has confessed to secretly photographing the text messages that Stephen Miles was sending during that time. So I got to give him credit. Like, he must have been on the ball, like to be people watching, to be observing to that degree, where he's like, I think this guy is sending this woman like live advice during question time. and he had the agency then to get out his phone and zoom in and take a photo of that. It's some pretty good spy work. I'll give him definitely give him some cred for that.
Yeah, fair enough. The wrong man at the right place can make all the difference in the world.
Yes. Okay, so there's been a minor reshuffle of the federal Liberal Party. So Queensland MP Luke Horwath will be the new Assistant Shadow Treasurer, replacing Stuart Robb. Melissa McIntosh will be opposition spokesman for West Sydney. By the way, a lot of these portfolios are new as well, like a spokesman for West Sydney. That's a pretty weird one, and that's one that the Liberal Party have just
invented. The spokesman for Arabs.
Yeah.
The Arab voice of Parliament.
Well, it's funny.
Look, like, you finally got it.
That's a Scottish name. Doesn't sound like she's representative of Western Sydney, really. Well, actually, to be fair, representing Western Sydney, you'd have to be a 56%er. You'd have to be an absolute mystery meat, because that's what Western Sydney is now.
Yeah.
So Andrew Bragg is taking on a role as assistant opposition spokesman for home ownership. I guess that's kind of an important one now. James Patterson has been allocated cabinet secretary, which was left vacant by Maurice Payne. Andrew Hastie is taking on additional portfolio. He's Shadow Minister for Defence, and now okay. And who got ScoMo's pre-selection? So it's a guy called Simon Kennedy. He's a 41-year-old guy. He unsuccessfully tried out for the marginally safe Liberal seat of Bennelong 3 years ago, I believe. 2022, not that long ago. And he's finally prevailed, winning by 158 votes.
All right.
That'll be a by-election, though, but it's in the seat of Cook that I believe is held by the Liberals by over 10%. So they'll shit it in. And in fact, the Labor Party are not even expected to run a candidate in that. So the Labor senator who passed away, her name is Linda White. Simply at this stage, they've just said it's a brief illness. But this happened only within months of Peter Murphy, who died, who of course was the member for Dunkley. So this does not mean a by-election, though, because Linda White was a senator. So it's just simply the next person on the ticket gets parachuted in, that's all. All right. So did you see this is our last story? Paul Keating's comments on ASIO and Penny Wong. So it's like, oh man, he's mad. He's mad at ASIO, but for the wrong reasons. I guess maybe I sort of agree with him actually, but I wish he would bring up other topics. But look, he's basically saying that ASIO is like a threat to securing good relations with China because we keep accusing China of, things like cyber attacks and other means of undermining.
They do that. That is something they do. The companies that do them have admitted to it.
Yeah, I just kind of think that sometimes there's a bit too much emphasis on that when we've got Israeli issues that are never actually really brought up.
I never talked about, yeah.
And and in some cases, I've given credit before to the Chinese government, they're actually very effective at arresting and extraditing Chinese criminals who reside in Australia and bringing them back to China.
Just a note on the Israeli factor there. By the way, you have to read like fucking a good 65% of the way through of Kevin Rudd's autobiography to like get a glimpse, not even like a direct statement, but get a glimpse that he was actually just straight up threatened by Mossad.
Yeah. That's what I mean. And that stuff is never brought up. Certainly not by ASIO. Mike Burgess would not in his wildest dreams bring that up. But Keating also attacked Penny Wong as well, basically for the same thing, saying that we are okay. Well, here's where his words were. He said Penny Wong was seeking to rattle the China can at ASEAN. So yeah, we covered this at the beginning of the show. There was sort of an emphasis on trying to push these Southeast Asian countries away from China. And, it's this kind of stuff that I think, Australia is wasting its time on. I actually do kind of agree with Keating on this. Yes, of course. I mean, if you're talking about a Chinese threat, here's what I fear. I fear them moving to our country and then buying up all our property. Okay?
Yes.
But does ASIO talk about that? Does Paul Keating talk about that? Does Penny Wong talk about that? Fuck no. Okay, that's my problem with the Chinese. If you're talking about geopolitics in the Asia Pacific, I don't give a fuck. That basically has nothing to do with us. All right? If China want to invade Taiwan, I don't care. I just don't give a shit. And we shouldn't be eternally trying to meddle along with America in all of these problems that have nothing to do with us. So
it's making the entire fucking situation worse over here. Like materialistically, not just like, in some pandering way or like, oh God, and in so many years, this is going to happen. No, it's making it materially worse now.
Right. That's it. Sorry, I tell a lie. There's one other story. And that is, the mystery politician. It's not Paul Keating, Nolsey. The mystery
politician was wrong. I'll admit that.
Yeah, well, Mike Burgess, said that it was a former politician who had access to the Prime Minister and even tried to get members of the Prime Minister's family to meet with organized spies, foreign spies. So we still don't know who it is. However, Adam Somyurek, the king of ethnic branch stacking and now member of the Democratic Labour Party in Victoria, he says he knows who it is. He says it's Anthony Byrne, who, by the way, was one of the people who was cooperating at the federal level with Adam Somyurek when it came to branch stacking in Victoria. Now, that's why those two were mates, but they also had a falling out because apparently when 60 Minutes, I think it was, who did the expose on Adam Somyurek, apparently Anthony Byrne fed them a lot of information that they ended up using in that report. And, that is obviously the absolute thorn in the side of Adam Somyurek's career. Like, that was the worst thing that ever happened to him. So, and he did admit, actually, if you read everything he said on this matter, he's like, yes, I do have an axe to grind with Anthony Byrne. But if you look at all the boxes he ticks, such as being privy to the nation's intelligence agencies and therefore all of the intelligence that they collate. He was also close to the former Prime Minister. By that, I think he meant Julia Gillard. I'm not sure. And he is a guy who has leaked information before, because he's like, look, he leaked information on me, his best mate. So even though, he doesn't know for absolute certain, he's the one pointing the finger at Anthony Byrne. So, yeah, it will be interesting. I'm not saying one way or the other here. I don't know. I need to look into this a bit further. But yeah, could be him. Could not be. Well, that's where we'll leave it, guys. Almost running into 3-hour territory there. So thank you very much for listening. And we will see you same time next week.